What is going on, ladies, gentlemen, listeners of the Didn't Ask Podcast? Welcome back to another episode of this right here podcast, the Didn't Ask Podcast. Welcome to episode 83. This time it is actually 83, not like I thought last time when it was actually 82 and I said 83, but we're finally here, episode 83. We're getting closer and closer to that 100th episode, the special episode, the most special episode that is going to be out there. And I'm looking forward to it. Just a couple more weeks till we finally get there, and it's going to be special. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about today's episode. What has everybody done this weekend? Hope you had a good weekend. I certainly did. It was a weekend with very little sleep, but sometimes, that is fun because there are more fun things in the planning. So on Saturday, well, I have to really back a little bit. On Friday, my dad called me and was like, hey, what are you doing Saturday? And I was like, I'm doing not much. I wanted to visit my grandpa, who is in like a hospital type, rehabilitation type, old people home, whatever the fuck it is. And I was like, well, I'm going to visit my grandpa. I'm going to visit grandpa. I don't know further what I'm going to do then. So he was like, well, you want to come to Arnhem with me? And I was like, sure. Like what is in Arnhem? Completely forgetting that, of course, one of the biggest fights of the year was in Arnhem. So he was like, yeah, Glory is in Arnhem. And I was like, oh, right, that's right. Fucking Badr Hari versus Alistair Overeem was in Arnhem. And I was just like, oh my God, yes, I would like to go there. Because legitimately, a couple of days before that, I went to work and all the billboards and stuff in the metro stations were plastered with Glory collision posters and reels and whatever. And I was like, well, I have never seen Alistair Overeem live. Like, I'm a big MMA fan, and with that, and my dad being a pro fighter himself, or an ex-pro fighter, now he's retired, but like, in being a pro fighter, he knows a lot of these people, and I have met people like Stefan Struve, Gegard Mousasi. Like, I've met the big MMA fighters that come from the Netherlands because of him, thanks to him. And therefore, I was just like, well, it's kind of weird that I have never met or even seen Alistair Overeem live, right? Because mostly, I believe he lived for a very long time in the US while competing for UFC. I think he lives in the Netherlands now again, but not very sure about that. But like a couple of days before the fight, I was like thinking like, hey, I've never really seen Alistair Overeem live. And then my dad called me and was like, hey, you want to go to Glory and be there live? And I was like, yes, please. I would love to do that because, again, wanted to see Alistair Overeem live. And now I did. And I saw him win with two pretty big knockdowns in the third round, which was absolutely fantastic, of course. That was Saturday, and then we went home. But of course, Arnhem to where I live, it's an hour and a bit. So eventually, I got home at like 1:30, and then I had to go to bed because, I had to go to bed. We're going to bed. I was in bed like at 2 something, and then I was like, well, it's gonna be a short night because racing starts. And of course, Sunday was the race of Suzuka, Japan, the Japan Grand Prix, and that started at 7 a.m. Dutch time. And I was like, well, I'm gonna do this. Luckily, I woke up by myself, not even needing a alarm clock, at 6:15. So at 6:15, I was just like, well, let me do my yoga. Let's get the fuck out and just be prepared for the race. Then the race got fucking postponed. And I was like, well, fuck me. They drove 3 rounds. And then it was like, yeah, there's too much rain. We're going to wait till the weather clears up a little bit. Eventually, it didn't really clear up at all. But we did still race. And it was doable for the drivers. Then we had this weird thing where people were saying like, oh, it's going to be half points. And then it was like, oh, it's going to be quarter points. It's like this amount of points, whatever. And eventually, thanks to Perez, because Checo has been doing fantastic work as a second driver. Like, some people hate on him from time to time. And at some points, I can understand that because sometimes he doesn't pull his weight as much as he should. But when it really comes down to it, he does pull his weight. We saw that last year in Abu Dhabi when he was defending very well against Hamilton so that Max could just push through. And now again, we saw Like, he didn't get in like the third place we actually want him to be in at the beginning of the race, but because Sainz crashed and then the drop out of the fucking race, Perez got that third spot he needed, and that meant that he could basically hunt Leclerc down for all the rounds that we drove, which was, I believe, like 27 in the end, something like that. So he was just pushing him, he was hunting him down, and that resulted in Leclerc losing his cool in the final corners of the race, resulting in him getting a 5-second time penalty, and that meant that Max Verstappen just became world champion. So the prophecy came through. Of course, this was what many people wanted to happen. Of course, first of Max becoming world champion was basically a given at this point, but people really wanted it to be in Japan because, of course, Honda is, or technically was, the engine supplier for Red Bull. They're still working together very closely now, and they probably will continue working together in the future. But people really wanted this to be like, hey, we can win this in Japan with Honda, for the Japanese people, and they absolutely fucking did it. And it was a bit of a clusterfuck in the end because, again, some commentators didn't know what the point scoring was going to be and how things were gonna settle in with the 5-second penalty that was given very quickly. So that's really good by race control, that because sometimes they go like, oh, something happens at the beginning of the race, and then they go, oh, we will investigate this after. And it's just like, well, why the fuck wouldn't we do it during the race in some way, shape, or forms? But this time they were just like, hey, we saw this happen. They said noted, and then before they could do the ceremony, they were like, okay, we're going to give him a 5-second penalty because he did cut the corner in one of the final corners. So that is a really cool that Max Verstappen became world champion this past weekend, which means that the rest of the season is going to be is nice and relaxed. I feel like we're going to just continue driving. I don't think that Red Bull is going to slow down because they can still, of course, win the Constructors' Championship, which is very important because that's where most of the money comes from and stuff like that. So that's very important to win. And I believe that also changes the paddock setup, but I'm not very sure how much that is going to do for next season. But we will see that later. Well, this is not a podcast where I talk to you about all those bullshit things. No. This is the podcast where I dive into the world of Reddit to see what the people asked Reddit and didn't ask me. Let's jump into the first question coming from the Ask Reddit subreddit, asked by user sheriff_disco. And they ask, what do you value more than money? There are many, many things I value more than money. Like, money is one of those things where it's like, it's important, but for me, it's very much at the bottom of the list of importance. It's needed because we need money so we can pay for our rent, especially now our energy bills and stuff like that, our water, our groceries. We need to stay alive. And that brings me to the real actual point. What's more valuable than money? It's your life. And that's a very cop-out answer, maybe. It's something that K. Cat Lee also said in the comments. They say health. And that is really your life and health are two of the fucking things that we should value the most in our lives. Like, without good health, you cannot live your life. And without living your life, you're not going to experience anything. And that is very important to continue growing. And it is very important that we continue living our lives again. And that's why I'm saying, like, life is very much more valuable than money, even though we need money in our life. But staying in good health and experiencing the world is a lot more important than just having money. And that's what they say, right? They say invest in experiences, because some people like to hoard money, and then they have a pile of money, and then they die and they have a pile of money. And it's just like, well, you were fucking rich, yes, but what did you do with that money? Like, what did you really do? And then the answer is, didn't do anything. So, and this is what I'm really experiencing in my own life right now, where I, for a long time, of course, was a student and then was looking for jobs and then got internships, which didn't really pay that well. They paid well for internships, I should say, but like they didn't pay well in the grand scheme of things. So I was living paycheck to paycheck, where it was just like, well, I need to pay for my Netflix, but I don't really have money to do so, and therefore we have to buy less shit for groceries or whatever, buy cheaper shit for groceries, or make sure that we go to the store where they have some kind of discount or deal or whatever. Now I am making money because I'm working regularly, and that really results in me just buying random shit, which sounds fucking bad, but like most of the things that I'm buying are like things that I wouldn't buy back then, but I can now afford. So I am buying shit like Legos again because I really enjoy building Legos, and I now finally have the money and the means to do so, right? So therefore I'm investing in experiences in that way. But I'm also seeing this with my grandparents who just sold their house and got their money from that, and therefore now they are experiencing life in a completely different way, because where they would go to a hotel maybe like once every 2, maybe 3 months, now they're basically going somewhere every month. And that is so fucking cool to see that they are just like, hey, we got the money, we lived our lives how you're quote unquote supposed to do it, where you go to work, you do stuff and whatever. But now they are just like, hey, we did the thing, we did everything for other people, and now it's time to enjoy life for ourselves. And now they're just traveling. They're traveling the country. They're driving places I've never even fucking heard of. And they are staying in hotels and going to casinos and you name it. It's fucking cool to see, right? And that's what really is important. Well, again, money facilitates all that. I think that experiencing the life that you could live and experiencing the world in different ways is very important. So, going back to the question asked by user Sheriff_Disco, what do you value more than money? And it's a couple of things. It's health, of course. But it's just like life as a whole, where it's just like, I do value money in the sense that, hey, we need money to get around. But on the other hand, it's also just like, hey, we have the ability to live our lives to the fullest if we choose to, if we so choose to. But some people value money more and therefore keep working and stacking their money, while other people are just like, hey, I worked for a month, let's take a weekend off to enjoy what I made this past month and then go on with my life. So that is, in my opinion, the most important thing. Just experiencing life from different points of views while also staying in good health. Thank you for your question, Sheriff Disco. Moving on to the second question of today, coming from user Halloween-365, and they ask, what keeps you from going insane? This is a very interesting question, and this week I had a little trouble finding good questions for the podcast. Like, I'm legitimately at the bottom of the barrel for the popular votes for this week. And I thought that this question was interesting in the sense that, what does keep a person from going insane? And for me, it's just like, going back to the answer to the previous question, it's like, it's experiences. I personally have this thing on my phone where I have women on my backgrounds, and sometimes they're scantily clad, in bikinis and stuff like that. But most of the time they aren't. And they're just pictures of women that I appreciate and I adore and I respect. Those really small things are things that keep me going throughout the day, where I look at my phone and I see Charlotte Flair and I think, man, I really miss Charlotte Flair in wrestling, right? But I'm glad she's on my background because that gives me a little dopamine hit. And then I unlock my phone and I see Maud Apatow. And I think, man, Maud Apatow is fucking cool. And those are small hits of like the endorphins that I get. And they just keep me going for a little bit. And that's why I have them on my background, because having a shitty background and just colors on your background doesn't fill me with joy. But these pictures do, right? And then I'm thinking like, oh, what are some other things that keep me going and keep me from going insane? And it's just like certain, again, going back to the first question, experiences that are planned. Right now, I'm planning, I have planned a trip to London this coming weekend. And I'm very much looking forward to that. I love London. It's one of my favorite cities I've ever visited. I've been there twice already in the last 5 years, I guess it was. Even though 3 years of that are just gone because of pandemic times. Then it technically is more. I think I went in I think it's 17, 18. I think that makes sense, right? 2017, 2018. I think that those are the dates, the years that I went to London. But anyways, those are like experiences that I'm looking forward to and that keep me going throughout the week, throughout the year. And other than that, it's also just now like, hey, maybe this sounds very stupid, but like we're in phase 4 of Marvel and we're about to close it out with Black Panther, which means that there's going to be a whole new world opening up for us with new TV shows, new movies, new stories to tell. And that's going to be very exciting. And those are things that keep me going throughout the day. And I personally try to live my life as, I want to say as efficiently as I can, but also not as efficient as at all. Where it's just like, I like to enjoy things. And sometimes it takes me 2 hours to do a thing that should maybe take me an hour, maybe an hour and a half. But because I'm listening to a podcast or watching a TV show at the same time, it takes me a little longer. But I don't personally care about that because I think that it's a lot more fun to do things, that I really enjoy while also doing things that I have to do. So, going back to the question asked by user Halloween-365, what keeps you from going insane? And it's just like the small little things in life. Again, my backgrounds keep me going because they give me that tiny endorphin hit, but also like the outlook at certain experiences where it's like, hey, this week Halloween Ends comes out, and that is very exciting for me. And then we have the season finale of She-Hulk this week. Those are small things that keep me going. But then I'm thinking about, hey, we're gonna get Black Panther Wakanda Forever in the near future. So that's gonna be fucking cool. Then that opens the whole MCU up for more stories to tell and more adventures to have. And that's what intrigues me as well. And then I go, well, I have never visited, a certain country, and that keeps me going. So there are many things that keep me going from going insane. And it's just like, enjoying the small things while also appreciating the big things at the same time. Thank you for your question, Halloween. Moving on to the third question of today, coming from user main-acrobatic, and they ask, what's the best documentary you've ever watched? What's the best documentary you've ever watched? There are many documentaries I've seen that I really enjoyed, but I think that The Story of God, which is a documentary series, not necessarily a documentary like one movie type thing, is one of the most interesting things I've seen because it's a fascinating thing where I, as a child, have always really liked religion in a sense that I think it's very interesting to read about religion and think about and read what people think about God or gods in plurality or gods plural. And having the story of God go through multiple countries and experience how Christianity is in different parts of the world and how that vibes up with the Islam and how that contradicts what Hinduism says and how Buddhism looks at things. And that those things are so interesting to me. So mixing those together and making that a show with Morgan Freeman as the presenter, that's fantastic to me. That's absolutely fantastic. Of course, it's also like an inside joke because Morgan Freeman is by many considered God because of the Bruce Almighty and the fucking Evan Almighty shit that he's done. So having him go throughout the world, experiencing things, talking to people, it's such a fun thing to watch. So if you have never seen it, please look it up because it's very fucking interesting. It's, I believe, 3 seasons with a whole bunch of episodes. I think they have maybe like 15 to 20 episodes every season, which is quite long, but they are all really fun and they have all like a different interpretation and different like subject, so to speak, where it's just like one is more about religious text and others are more like about like religious things happening or basically like magical things happening, where there is one in the final season, I believe, about a guy who was like a window cleaner at like a really high building. Then he got struck by lightning, fell off the fucking lift, and then dropped 10 stories down or whatever, and then he survived, which is absolutely fucking crazy to think about. So that is a very fun story and a very interesting story to listen to. And those are like some of the things that happen in the show. So yeah, I think that is one of my favorite documentaries for your question, main-acrobatic, what's the best documentary you've ever seen? And I think Story of God is pretty much up there. Might not necessarily be the best, but like I think that it's a very interesting documentary to go through. Thank you for your question. Moving on to the fourth question of the Ask Reddit for today, and this one comes from user ZMeFi, and they ask, what do you think about wearing no bra? To me, I think that it's totally fine. I think that women should decide what the fuck they want to do themselves. We live in a society where, of course, breasts are very much sexualized in many ways, shape, or forms. So it is really hard for me to just sit here with a straight face and be just like, oh, just don't wear a bra, it's fine. Because many people don't think it's fine, which I think is bullshit, of course. But like, I do think that because our society has sexualized boobs and especially nipples so much, I don't think you can get angry when somebody points out that you're not wearing a bra or that they can see your nipples or stuff like that. You shouldn't be mad about that. You should just say, okay, that's fine, yeah, I know, or whatever. Then you also have the option of like boob tape or pasties and whatever that could hide that shit. But like, if you don't want to wear a bra, don't wear a bra. It's all on you. But on the other hand, it's just like, don't look up weirdly when people start making comments about your appearance in that way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? Because that is the sucky situation about the free the nipple movement. So going back to the question asked by user ZMeFi, what do you think about wearing no bra? Personally, I think it's totally fine, but on the other hand, it's just like, you're gonna expect, as a woman, you're gonna expect people to comment about that, and I don't really think you can get really mad about that. So be prepared for that. Thank you for your question. Moving on to the final question coming from the Ask Reddit subreddit for today, asked by user Baylona6, and they ask, what older horror movie, 40 plus years old, still holds up? We live in 2022. So many of the most iconic movies are now older than 40 years old. And that is fucking crazy to me to think. So what older horror movie holds up very well? It's Halloween. Halloween came out in 1978, and it still is one of the best slasher horror movies that we have. It's absolutely fucking crazy. I watched it very recently in preparation for the new Halloween that comes out this week, Halloween Ends. And there are so many things that happen in that movie and so many cool things that it's really hard for people to be like, oh yeah, this movie doesn't hold up or whatever. Like, it's still scary, even though it's not that scary at all, especially like looking back what the kill count is in that movie. But it still holds up very well, and we know that it holds up because we are still releasing movies in the same timeline, even though the Halloween timeline has been split up multiple times. But like, we are still getting movies in that timeline, making sure that, hey, Halloween from 1978 is still canon, right? That's fucking crazy. Then we have the Friday the 13th movies, which of course also fantastic. Not all of them, but most of them are. And we're now talking about 40 plus year old movies. And then the first Halloween, of course, comes to mind, because that one came out in 1981, which would also mean that it is like 41 years old now. And it is really fucking fun. Of course, it doesn't have Jason Voorhees. It has Mama Voorhees. But it still is a very fucking... Oh, spoiler alert if you didn't know that. But like, it's still a very fun movie that still holds up very well. And again, has people clamoring for more Friday the 13th. Even though we probably can't get that because the stupid lawsuit with the inventor and creator and writer and whatever the fuck that they're doing right now. But yeah, like, there are so many cool fucking movies that are so old now that we consider classics, that we would have considered classics anyway, but now they're even more iconic, and especially when they still hold up as these ones do. So going back to the question asked by Baylana6, what older horror movie, 40 plus years old, still holds up? And I would say Halloween, the first one, 1978, holds up very well. And then the first Halloween, both older than 40 years, but still hold up pretty fucking good, if you ask me. Thank you for your question. And now, moving on to the final question of the day, coming from the MIDSL subreddit, asked by user OK-Tooth 2640, and they ask, am I the asshole for laughing at my mother-in-law when she ate my snacks and got way too high? My wife and I just moved back into her hometown. We love living in the big city, but we had agreed when we got married that when we started a family, we would move to the small town. It sort of sucks, but I'm only a 45-minute drive away from a theater and a good restaurant. It's not like we are living in the middle of the woods. We live in Canada. Weed is fully legal here. I like to make wheat butter and cook with it. I make brownies or fudge, and my wife and I both partake. Her not so much right now because she is breastfeeding. My wife insisted that we give her mom a key for emergencies. I disagree, but I lost the vote. So we talked about it, and I said I was fine with it, but it was only for emergency. She wasn't to use it to come over and clean up or anything like that. Her mom agreed, and we gave her a key. She followed the rule for about 2 months. My wife is out of town in the city for the weekend with visiting friends. Since it is a 2-hour drive to that side of the city, she is just staying there. I came home last night and found my mother-in-law high as a kite in my living room. She had decided that since my wife was out of town, I needed a home-cooked meal. One thing led to another, and she found some fudge. She was so high, all she was doing was staring at the TV. Indica will do that to you. I called my wife and laughed my ass off. She is giving me shit for letting her mom get high, and for laughing at her mom. Mother-in-law is currently resting in the guest bedroom. My wife's stepdad came to get her, but she is not moving. We had a few beers and watched the Jays get destroyed. She came into our home and ate my stuff without permission. I'm not really upset. She is super helpful and she has always been nice to me. I just think it's hilarious. But my wife says I'm an asshole for laughing at her mom. Am I the asshole? I would say you're definitely not the asshole. You gave the key to your mother-in-law in case of an emergency, and then while your mother-in-law was trying to be sweet, she did something that you shouldn't do, and that is eat something that you don't know what it is, really. Like, she thought, like, oh, this is great fudge, so she just stuffed her face and then got fucking high as fuck. So, like, I think that your mother-in-law just made a real huge mistake where she was like, oh, I'm gonna eat fudge, and then by being fucking greedy, I might add, because if she is really high as a kite, that means that she didn't eat like 1 cube of fudge. Like, she took a bit of fudge. She fucking ate that shit. So I wouldn't say you're the asshole because you didn't do anything. Like, if you were having like her over and you were just like, hey, you want a cup of tea? I got some fudge. And then you would just feed her the fudge and then laugh your ass off because she got high. Then I would say, yes, you're the asshole. But in this case, she basically broke into your home because there was no real reason for her to be there. Then started eating your shit, which she shouldn't do to begin with, and then got high as a kite. So, to me, definitely not the asshole. Like, this is fucking hilarious. Again, you didn't push her to eat this fudge. She did it herself while you were away. So, you have nothing to do with the situation. And then if this situation just gets thrown in your lap and you decide laughing at it is the best option at the time, that is the best option at the time. So just go ahead and fucking laugh your ass off. So going back to the question asked by user OK-2640, am I the asshole for laughing at my mother-in-law when she ate my snacks and got way too high? You're definitely not the asshole. Your mother-in-law entered the house for no real reason and decided to eat your shit without knowing what it was. And then she got high as a kite. Because she's up there. Do quick flyby fantastic. And then, yeah, she got high as a kite and then lost her shit. So, no. You laughing at that isn't really your problem. So you're definitely not the asshole. Thank you for your question. And that's going to do it for me for this week. I hope you had a good time. And if you did, please leave a rating on Apple Podcast and Spotify because both places give you the ability to leave a rating. If you want to know where this podcast can be found, you can go to anchor.fm. Over here, you can find all the hyperlinks to your favorite podcast services like Podcast Addict, like Pocket Cast, like Google Podcast, like Apple Podcast, like Amazon Podcast. If there is a podcast app, this show should be there. If it's not, you can go to anchor.fm and press the message button and tell me where this show is not at. Then I'll try my best to get it on there. Via that message button, you can also ask me a personal question. Just press the button and record a voice memo for me to listen to so I can put that in the show as well and answer your question live on air. If you don't want your voice to be heard on this right here podcast, I can totally understand. Just say that somewhere in your message and then I'll read your question out myself so I can still give you the answer with you being anonymous. I will be back next week, and if you want to know what I'm doing in the meantime and in between time, you can go to track.tv. Over here, you can find all the movies and TV shows that I'm currently watching, sometimes while I'm watching them, which is really fun to keep up with. That link will be in the show description as well as all the previously mentioned links. Well, that's going to do it for me for now. I hope to see you back next week. Thanks for listening and goodbye.